What if I told you that everything you were ever taught about hard work is a beautifully packaged lie? From the time you could hold a pencil or swing a hammer, you were told to grind, to hustle, to sweat. That if you worked long enough, hard enough, you'd rise, be rewarded, and finally be respected. But look around. The people who work the hardest are rarely the ones in control. They break their backs while others play chess with their futures. They sweat under the sun while someone in the shade signs the checks. The glorification of hard work isn't noble. It's strategic conditioning. Because here's the truth they never wanted you to hear. Hard work isn't dangerous because it fails. It's dangerous because it keeps you obedient. The hardest workers are usually the easiest to control, predictable, exhausted, and harmless. You don't fear the man who's always tired. You ignore him. He's not playing the real game. Niccolo Machiavelli warned that appearances deceive, and the most virtuous often hide the sharpest minds. But today's greatest illusion isn't goodness. It's effort. The cult of hard work is the modern leash. In Renaissance Florence, power didn't belong to the blacksmith or the soldier. It belonged to the mind in the shadows, the one who moved pieces others didn't even know existed. Control was never earned by labor. It was acquired through leverage. A prince doesn't rule because he works harder than the peasant. He rules because he sees further, speaks less, and acts only when precision guarantees victory. Strategy isn't loud. It just isn't poetic. The masses worship the worker, while the elite design the conditions that make the worker necessary. Ask yourself, who benefits from a society that praises endless effort? Who wins when you're too tired to question, too busy to think, too proud of your exhaustion to see it's a trap? You are taught to love the grind, but pride is not power, and fatigue is not virtue. The man who never stops moving never notices he's walking in circles. Hard work becomes a treadmill disguised as a staircase, an illusion of progress that keeps you visible, compliant, and stuck. Because once you mistake usefulness for power, you've already lost. A lion doesn't rule the jungle because he hunts every day. He rules because he chooses when to hunt. His stillness commands silence. His restraint terrifies more than another's aggression. The hard worker runs toward the problem. The strategist waits, observes, and ends the game with one precise strike. Yet we keep handing out medals for exhaustion. We celebrate burnout as if it's sacred. We call sleep weakness, rest luxury, and silence a flaw. But who planted those ideas in your head? Who benefits when you never stop, when you produce endlessly but never command? Hard work without thought becomes self-betrayal. It disguises itself as discipline, but it's often avoidance, a way to escape reflection, to dodge the discomfort of thinking strategically. That's why kings had advisors, not calluses. The most feared men in history were rarely the loudest. They were the ones who moved once, not 1,000 times. The ones who turned other people's effort into their advantage, who weaponized stillness like a blade. So when someone tells you to just work harder, understand what that really means. That's not advice. It's a command meant for someone who isn't a threat. Because the moment you stop doing and start thinking, they stop applauding your grind and start fearing your presence. There's a hidden sickness among the ambitious, a kind of spiritual virus passed down as wisdom. It whispers that effort equals worth, that suffering proves you deserve success. But suffering alone is not a credential. It's often the tax the unstrategic pay for their confusion. The world is filled with men who confuse exhaustion with progress. They wear their fatigue like armor, believing that if they outwork everyone, the throne will somehow appear. But thrones are not awarded for effort. They're seized through timing, insight, and manipulation. The man who works 10 times harder often ends up serving the one who thinks 10 times sharper. Look at the gladiator. He sweats, he bleeds, he dies to the sound of applause. But who holds real power in the arena? The emperor, the one who decides, with a flick of his hand, who lives and who dies. He doesn't fight for approval. He commands it. Hard work without strategy is gladiator blood dramatic, admired, but disposable. And yet, society has trained you to confuse nobility with suffering. You've been told that endurance equals virtue, that rest is failure. But the truth is simple. The most powerful men aren't the busiest. They're the most deliberate. They don't move faster. They remove friction. They don't compete harder. They redefine the game itself. A Machiavellian mind doesn't ask, "How can I do more?" It asks, "How can I make less look like more?" That's the difference between the man climbing the ladder and the one who built it and sold it to him. The worker seeks validation. The strategist engineers perception. The worker waits to be chosen. The strategist removes choice entirely. So the next time you're tempted to glorify effort, remember, the world doesn't reward the man who grinds the hardest. It rewards the man who moves the quietest, the one who makes others grind for his vision while he watches from the shadows. Why do we worship effort? Why do we glorify the selfless man who never stops? Because he's safe. The one who grinds endlessly is too tired to question, too distracted to challenge, too drained to see the system that feeds on his exhaustion. He is praised not because he's powerful, but because he's predictable. And predictable men build empires they'll never own. Machiavelli understood this psychological trap centuries ago. The powerful don't fight the worker. They reward him with symbols of honor, praise, and validation. Because flattery is cheaper than freedom. When you're addicted to praise, they don't need chains to control you. All they have to do is clap, and applause has enslaved more men than fear ever did. You've been conditioned to believe that constant movement equals progress. But the truth is this: the man who's always visible is the easiest to manipulate. The more you show your hand, the less mystery you hold. The more you announce your grind, the less leverage you command. The one who boasts of his effort reveals his limits. The one who works in silence controls perception. Hard work without direction becomes an idol. It gives you a sense of meaning while quietly draining your power. Machiavelli warned that a ruler must never be too transparent, because visibility invites attack. You are taught to prove yourself through action, to show your progress to the world. But progress shown too soon becomes a map for your enemies. Every move you reveal is a target drawn. Every goal you announce becomes resistance waiting to meet you. Transparency is not strength. It's exposure. You must learn the art of concealment. The man who cannot be read cannot be controlled. He holds power by creating confusion, by letting others guess, by letting silence do the work. The moment you reveal everything, you stop being a mystery and start being a manual. And manuals are meant to be used. Look at the lion again. He doesn't roar every day. He doesn't explain his authority. He doesn't prove himself through constant motion. He moves when necessary, and when he does, the forest remembers. But most people today are addicted to noise. They think visibility is power, when in truth, invisibility is control. A lion that never stops roaring invites challenge. A lion that stays silent keeps the jungle guessing. Machiavelli said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does at last." But he could have added this: the wise man rarely announces it at all. Silence is not emptiness, it's strategy. It's the space where others project their fear and curiosity onto you, and curiosity is control. In this modern age, everyone is performing. Every thought, every success, every moment of effort is broadcast. But kings do not audition. Generals do not post their war plans. The truly powerful operate in a rhythm invisible to others. When you always need to be seen, you're no longer leading, you're entertaining. And performers don't win wars. They just make noise while someone else writes the script. Machiavelli would tell you this. If you're always available, you're always replaceable. If you're always predictable, you're always manageable. If you're always talking, you're always revealing. The man who can be read can be controlled. The man who cannot be read controls the room. So stop explaining yourself. Stop announcing your intentions. The world doesn't need another man begging to be understood. It needs a man who can make others wonder what he knows. You must learn the art of strategic withholding, of revealing just enough to shape perception, but never enough to lose control of it. You've been told that success is built on honesty, transparency, openness. But Machiavelli saw what few dared to admit. Total honesty is a weapon handed to your enemies. The wise man doesn't lie, he just doesn't explain. The fool shares everything and calls it virtue. The wise man withholds and calls it strength. And so, the new power doesn't belong to the busiest. It belongs to the most deliberate. To the one who doesn't run faster but removes the obstacles. To the one who doesn't compete harder but changes the rules. The modern prince doesn't ask, "How can I work more?" He asks, "How can I make others work for me?" This is the difference between the worker and the strategist, between the gladiator and the emperor. The gladiator fights to be remembered. The emperor shapes what's remembered. The gladiator bleeds for approval. The emperor directs applause. You must choose now. Will you keep proving your worth through exhaustion, or will you begin to craft leverage through restraint? Will you keep performing for applause, or will you move in silence until applause becomes irrelevant? The world doesn't remember the man who tried the hardest. It remembers the one who changed the game with the fewest moves. Hard work has its place, but blind obedience to effort is servitude dressed up as honor. You are not here to be admired for your grind. You are here to be feared for your precision. So step back, observe, work less visibly, speak less often, think more ruthlessly. Because the man who cannot be read cannot be controlled. And the man who cannot be controlled becomes untouchable. You were taught that to get ahead, you must prove yourself every day. To show up earlier, stay later, and outwork everyone else. But what if that's the very reason you stay trapped where you are? The world doesn't reward those who try the most. It rewards those who move with the least wasted motion. The crowd cheers for the fighter who bleeds, but the kingdom belongs to the one who never had to fight at all. That's the uncomfortable truth most people can't face. Hard work isn't the road to freedom. It's the ritual of the obedient. It keeps you busy enough to miss the real game being played above your head. While you grind, someone else is writing the rules. While you chase recognition, someone else is deciding how much you'll be allowed to earn. The illusion of progress keeps you loyal, because tired men don't rebel, they rest. Machiavelli would look at our world today and laugh. He'd say that modern power doesn't wear armor. It wears invisibility. It hides behind systems, technology, policy, layers of control that reward your effort just enough to keep you producing. He'd tell you the world is not run by those who wake up earliest or go home last. It's run by those who decide what everyone else will wake up early for. And here's where the trap becomes deadly. You confuse movement with meaning. You think that as long as you're doing something, you're becoming someone. But directionless work is the perfect disguise for stagnation. You're not climbing, you're running in place. You've mistaken the noise of effort for the sound of progress. Hard work is useful only when it's strategic, when it builds leverage. Leverage means every move multiplies your impact. Without leverage, effort becomes a treadmill. With leverage, a single action can move mountains. That's why the powerful invest in influence, not activity. They buy attention, not hours. They master perception, not procedure. Machiavelli wrote that the wise ruler acts against loyalty, charity, and humanity when necessary to preserve the state. Translated into modern terms, he acts against his conditioning when survival demands it. Sometimes that means abandoning the very virtues that once made you proud. Discipline, loyalty, consistency. They sound noble, but they can also chain you to mediocrity when you never question who they're serving. You were taught that the way to win is to be visible, to show your effort, your devotion, your progress. But visibility is a weapon used against you. The moment people can predict you, they can position themselves above you. When they know your schedule, your rhythm, your emotional buttons, you've given them the blueprint to control you. That's why Machiavelli warned rulers to conceal their intentions, to appear virtuous while acting decisively in private. Power lives in mystery. The more unpredictable you are, the harder it becomes to control you. The man who can't be read becomes a mirror. Everyone projects their fears, hopes, and expectations onto him, never realizing he's already 10 moves ahead. Mystery isn't decoration, it's armor. So, what does this mean in your world? At your job, in your relationships, in your ambitions? It means stop explaining your every move. Stop broadcasting your goals. Stop asking for permission to think differently. You don't owe transparency to people who would use it to manage you. Your silence creates distance, and that distance builds gravity. In a world addicted to exposure, restraint becomes power. When everyone else is shouting, the man who stays silent makes others whisper his name. When everyone else rushes, the man who waits becomes unpredictable. Stillness is not passivity, it's preparation. It's what Machiavelli called reading the silence before the storm. The modern world tells you that success demands constant communication. Post more, show more, prove more. But every time you show your hand, you lose leverage. Kings do not audition. Generals do not justify. The more you explain yourself, the more power you give away. People who don't understand your silence will invent explanations for it, and that's exactly how you control them. So the next time you feel the urge to prove your worth through more effort, stop. Ask yourself, is this building leverage or just burning energy? Is this work expanding your reach, or is it only deepening your dependency on approval? Because if your labor doesn't buy you freedom, it's servitude. Machiavelli believed that most men are predictable because they confuse virtue with control. They obey the rules they were never meant to question. But the ones who rise, the ones who rewrite the game, are those who master restraint, who dare to step back while everyone else sprints blindly forward. So remember this, it's not the weight of the work that breaks you. It's the betrayal of realizing the work was never meant to make you free. They told you to climb the ladder, but they didn't tell you it was leaning against the wrong wall. The true discipline isn't working harder, it's knowing exactly when to stop, to pause, to wait until one move does what 1,000 could not. Because the man who moves less but achieves more is not lucky, he's dangerous. True discipline is not about endless motion. It's about precision, knowing when to act and when to hold your fire. A strategist does not chase every opportunity. He selects a few, ignores the noise, and strikes once with perfect timing. The rest of the world runs in panic, trying to keep up. He waits. He plans. He moves once, and when he does, everything shifts. Machiavelli would call this the power of strategic withholding, the ability to hold your energy, your attention, your ambition until the world bends toward your silence. Because the man who is always visible becomes predictable. The man who always speaks becomes readable. And the man who is predictable is controllable. You were taught to announce your goals, to share your dreams, to let people see how hard you're working. But every declaration is a target. Every word is a coordinate someone can use against you. The loud man gives others a map. The quiet man leaves them blind. And blindness creates fear. That's why mystery is not weakness, it's command. When people don't know what you're planning, they begin to imagine. And imagination is a weapon, one that works for you when you feed it scarcity. Think about it. The quiet man in a loud room becomes the center of attention without saying a word. People begin to project importance onto him. They wonder what he knows, who he is, what he's hiding. That curiosity is psychological leverage, and Machiavelli built an empire on it. He understood that control isn't about dominance. It's about perception. The less they can read you, the more they respect you. The more they think they know you, the more they manipulate you. This is why the strategist practices opacity. He reveals just enough to seem transparent, but never enough to be known. Because once they think they've figured you out, you're no longer a threat, you're a pattern, and patterns are predictable. In a world obsessed with exposure, the ultimate rebellion is silence. The quiet mind sees everything. It observes before reacting, listens before speaking, calculates before moving. The man who does this cannot be defeated easily, because he never plays on someone else's tempo. He decides when the conversation ends. He decides when the game changes. Machiavelli knew that timing is everything. He wrote that the wise man does at once what the fool does at last. But the wiser man still waits until the fool reveals his hand. He moves when the field is clear, when the opposition is tired, when the noise has burned itself out. That's when silence turns into a weapon sharper than any blade. So ask yourself, do you control your motion, or does your motion control you? Every day you wake up, race through tasks, chase emails, attend meetings. But who truly benefits from your busyness? Is your movement serving your strategy or serving someone else's system? Because the man who works hardest inside a broken system is not successful. He's enslaved efficiently. That's why Machiavelli taught that power does not belong to those who act first. It belongs to those who act decisively. The general who charges early wastes soldiers. The ruler who speaks too soon gives away intent. The worker who shows every card loses bargaining power before he's even paid. You don't win by being early. You win by being inevitable. Think of the chessboard. The most dangerous piece isn't the one that moves constantly, it's the one that hasn't moved yet. It sits, coiled with potential, commanding attention simply by waiting. Every opponent plans around it. That's real influence, not constant activity, but the ability to make others move because you didn't. And that is what the modern world has made you forget. You are trained to prove yourself daily, to show up, to over-explain, to post every accomplishment. But kings don't explain. Generals don't tweet. The more mysterious your rhythm, the more power your presence carries. So learn to disappear, not from the world, but from the noise. Learn to move in silence while others broadcast their failures disguised as effort. Work not for attention, but for position. Because position is the true source of power. It's not loud, it's not visible, but it allows you to see everything while revealing nothing. When you operate from stillness, every move feels like thunder because it's rare. And rarity commands respect. There's no scarcity in hard work. Billions of people do it. But there's infinite power in restraint, because almost no one practices it. Machiavelli would tell you, the world doesn't remember the man who ran fastest. It remembers the man who arrived complete, the one who prepared in silence, observed in darkness, and revealed himself only when the time was right. So, stop announcing. Stop explaining. Let your work exist in the shadows until it speaks for itself. Let your silence become a storm that builds quietly in the distance. Because the day you stop proving and start positioning, that's the day they stop managing you and start fearing your return. That's the power of restraint. That's the mastery of silence. And that's the beginning of real control. Now that the illusion is cracked, you can finally see it. Hard work isn't wrong, it's simply overrated. It's the foundation, not the fortress. The beginning, not the crown. You've been conditioned to believe that effort itself is sacred, that the more you bleed, the more you deserve. But Machiavelli would tell you the truth no one dares to say out loud. Effort is visible, and what's visible can be used. The powerful don't control the strongest. They control the most predictable. And there's nothing more predictable than the man who's always trying to prove himself. You were trained to equate exhaustion with virtue, obedience with discipline, loyalty with morality. But this was never about making you great. It was about making you manageable. The world doesn't need free thinkers. It needs consistent producers. Men who wake up, work hard, stay tired, and never question the design of the system they serve. You were taught that hard work is noble, because the people who benefit from your labor needed you to believe that. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He warned that rulers maintain control not through force, but through illusion, the illusion of fairness, of merit, of virtue. Tell the masses that work is their path to salvation, and they'll build empires they'll never own. He wrote that men are so simple and so obedient to present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived. The modern deception is effort itself. You've seen it. The hardest workers rarely rule. The most loyal employees rarely rise. The ones who grind the most often remain invisible. Because power doesn't reward effort, it rewards effect. The worker asks, "How can I do more?" The strategist asks, "How can I do less, but make it echo louder?" That's the evolution Machiavelli would demand from you, to stop being the soldier who fights for applause, and start being the general who decides when the war even happens. The worker moves constantly. The strategist moves deliberately. The worker spends energy. The strategist spends intention. The worker fights for recognition. The strategist fights for position. Effort can be noble, but without direction, it becomes a leash. It ties you to systems that praise your consistency while quietly stealing your time. The man who mistakes movement for progress becomes his own captor, running endlessly, never realizing the cage was built from his own pride. Machiavelli believed that the man who cannot adapt will serve the one who can. He'd tell you that the modern form of slavery isn't forced labor. It's voluntary exhaustion. You believe you're chasing success, but you're actually feeding a machine that survives on your predictability. So what's the way out? Leverage. Control of time, perception, and energy. The worker sells his hours. The strategist sells his influence. The worker shows his effort. The strategist hides his hand. The worker earns pay. The strategist earns freedom. And here's where most men fail. They think visibility equals power. They believe being seen makes them matter. But visibility is vulnerability. Every time you announce your plans, you give others a weapon. Every time you explain yourself, you reveal your weakness. Power doesn't announce. It arrives. The lion doesn't roar every morning to prove he's king. He's silent most of the time until he needs to act. His restraint is his advantage. His quiet is his dominance. The forest respects him not because he's loud, but because he could be loud and chooses not to. This is the lesson Machiavelli would etch into your mind. Restraint is not passivity, it's precision. The man who reacts less controls more. The one who speaks less reveals less. The one who moves less is harder to predict, and therefore harder to defeat. So stop worshiping movement. Stop proving yourself to people who profit from your motion. Stop mistaking busyness for meaning. Every great strategist knows the same truth. The power is not in constant motion. It's in the timing of motion. Timing is what separates chaos from control. The fool rushes because he fears being forgotten. The wise man waits because he knows patience multiplies his force. The soldier fights every battle. The general chooses his moment. The worker runs every day. The strategist builds momentum in silence. Machiavelli would tell you to become unreadable, to train your emotions into weapons and your silence into armor, to let people wonder what you're planning, because confusion is power. Let them underestimate you, because underestimation is camouflage. The more they think they understand you, the easier it is for them to use you. The less they can define you, the more they fear what you might do next. That is why the strongest presence in any room often belongs to the man who says nothing. He listens, calculates, measures, and when he finally speaks, the air changes. That's real power, not volume, but gravity. And once you taste that, once you learn to win without being seen, you'll never go back. You'll stop seeking applause. You'll stop needing recognition. You'll stop performing for systems that want you exhausted, because applause is just permission in disguise. When you need it, you've already surrendered. So make this your vow. I choose leverage over labor. I choose precision over performance. I choose silence over noise. You are not here to be admired for your grind. You are here to become impossible to replace, impossible to read, impossible to control. You are not here to serve. You are here to design, to build systems that run while you rest, to make your absence louder than another man's effort. Because the world doesn't remember the hardest worker. It remembers the quiet architect who reshaped the game, the one who moved once and changed everything. And from this moment forward, that will be you. Not the worker proving his worth, but the strategist choosing his moment. Not the man begging to be seen, but the one whose silence is unforgettable. The one who controls the rhythm of his own ascent, deliberate, unreadable, inevitable.